Hello everyone, and welcome back to my series of videos detailing the making of a small pipe organ from scratch. Most of you, I'm sure, will recognise where I am today. We're in the Royal Albert Hall as part of the BBC Prom season, and I'm providing one of my organs for a concert tomorrow night. We're now moving on to the final phase of making the pipes, putting the pipe feet and the stoppers in. We'll finish those off and we'll move on to the keyboard. So I hope you enjoy it, and please do like and subscribe. Right, so we've made the pipe bodies and we've fitted the caps to the bodies. Now we've just got to make the stoppers and the pipe feet. We'll start by turning the handles for the larger stoppers from on the 8-foot middle C downwards. I'm going to let this run. There's not a lot I can say about this. It's just the profile is pretty classical. Just the rough and gouge, get it roughly down to the right diameter. You notice I've set the finished diameter with a spanner, and I'll just join the two ends with the skew chisel. So we've got an even cylinder to start work from. And then we use what's called a storyboard, so it's just a strip of wood with notches cut out, and you just run the pencil along it, making marks on the piece, knowing where to make your incisions. We start by doing the mortise. This is the mortise that goes into the stopper. Again, using a spanner to determine the diameter. Traditionally, you'd use a pair of turner's calipers, but I just find the spanner a little more rugged or solid. And there is a possibility that the caliper can move as if you're moving this. It's an adjustable caliper, so it could actually move while you're offering it up to the work. And then the next piece is going to be different. Obviously, with a spanner, you know exactly where you are, and each one is going to be identical. Now the spindle gouge, just to get the profile on the bottom of the handle, and then just run the taper of the handle down with the skew chisel. And we'll tidy that up with a bit of sandpaper. It shouldn't need much. And then we'll just do the part off the top with a parting chisel and do a slight taper on the top with the skew chisel, using the skew chisel. Its other use, rather than planing, as almost a dividing trimming tool. This stopper handle is made of pine, so it's lovely to turn this. If you've got sharp chisels, you get a lovely finish off this. And there's the finished handle. Now with the 4-foot stoppers, they will be what's called pierced. So it's a chimney flute, so we'll have a hole through the stoppers. It just changes the harmonics of the note slightly. So you're looking for a contrast between the 4 and the 8-foot. And this is one way of doing that. So these holes are only in the 4-foot. I don't have to drill all the way through at this stage. I will do that once the leather gasket is on the stopper. I'll drill right the way through the rest of the handle, through the stopper and through the leather at the same time. And there are the handles all done. Now we make the stoppers themselves, which is what the handles go into. Again, these are the blocks left over from or I should say the spaces left over from the blocks that we made for making the pipes. That's smoking a little bit. I think it's a combination of a slightly blunt blade and a very resinous piece of wood. So, yeah, let's keep an eye on that. So now we've got to very, very carefully fit the stopper to the pipe and individually. Now you'll see that it's very slightly smaller, obviously, because you need the thickness of the leather. And I've got different size spacers for different thickness leathers. The bottom pipes will have quite thick leather, about 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick, and it's the same leather I use for bedding, like as gaskets on the soundboard on the wind chest. And as I go up, the leather will get thinner and thinner. Just got to be, each one has got to be exactly the same, and you don't want the stopper to be too loose, obviously, but you also don't want it to be too tight. You need to be able to move it easily, and so it's easy for the tuner. So we have to fit both sides, obviously the X and the Y axis. Again, very laborious but critical. I may find when I'm voicing, I may just, if they're not quite how I want them, I will take a little bit more off. They will be on the tight side doing it this way, so I'd rather it be too tight than too loose. So you do find after they've been in the instrument for a few years, they do shrink, become loose, and you end up having to pack them. So now we cut the mortise for the handle that we made. This is where using the spanner on the lathe was so good, because those mortises or those tenons are exactly the right size for that drill, as you'll see. So you don't need much glue. I'm just checking the way the stopper is the right way up. So you've got to be quick, because that glue goes off quite quickly, and you'll find you're stuck and you can't turn it, but there it is. So it's a little bit longer. I have to trim it off with a saw, a bit longer than you need. Just tidy that up with a plane, and then we put a slight chamfer on it, so that makes it easier to insert the stopper into the end of the pipe. There we go, to the leather. Guess pretty much how much excess you need. It's not an exact science, because that will be trimmed off. A little bit of glue. Then on these big ones, I'll just fix the leather in place with some staples. Probably not necessary. That glue is pretty good at sticking the leather to the wood. Now we're ready to insert it into the pipe. As I said, this will be quite tight. I may have to just trim this down when time comes, but I won't be voicing this for a while, so it may just shrink a little bit between now and then. So we knock the stopper down so that it's just under flush, and then trim the leather off. I didn't actually make a very good job of that, but I will go back and clean that up. The pressures of being on camera. Yeah, that will be tidied up. But that's a nice tight fit now. So to show you briefly a smaller pipe. It's exactly the same process, obviously a smaller spacer for thinner leather. We just make sure that it's the right gap, so the stopper's the right interference. Sorry, the rubbish camera work, my hand's in the way, but you get the idea of what I'm doing. Just inserting that little tapered bit of wood to the gap. Marking where the stopper goes, which way round. And what I didn't show you on the bigger stopper was how that what I did to find the centre of the stopper was to run diagonals, corner to corners. I think this is probably the smallest stopper with a handle on it, with a round handle on it. The rest will be rectangular handles, which we'll move on to after this. Now with this, because the stopper's so small, that pine isn't strong at all, so I've had to just make that hole slightly bigger with a reamer, so that it doesn't split as it goes in with the glue. A nice bead of glue coming out there, and then just stop the end, cut the end excess off. Clean that up. Cut the chamfer. I'm just trying to get the shot into the middle of the frame, that's why I keep moving the piece of wood. And then this is the thinner leather. This is almost like if you clean your car with a chamois leather, then this is exactly the same sort of stuff. Just under flush. Try and make a better job of trimming the leather off. And that's a 4 foot, it's a middle C, I think, probably. You can tell by the hole in the stopper. And there's a sound, first sounds, or the first sounds with a stopper in it. Now, I was saying earlier when I was drilling the holes through into the handle on the lathe, I didn't need to go all the way down because I wanted to wait until the stopper and leather were fitted, and there we have the hole going all the way through now. Now we move on to the little stoppers from on the 8 foot, probably middle C upwards. We start by making I've basically measured all the sizes of the pipes both ways, sideways, front to back and side to side. Put that on a spreadsheet, and I've subtracted the thickness of the leather, so I know roughly how thick to make these little pieces of wood. They will be slightly over thickness, and I'll have to plane them to fit each pipe individually. But the first thing I do is cut a notch out, so I've got a reference to cut the taper on the handle, which is what I do next. Again, this is pine, so it's very, very soft and very easy to cut, but you still need a very sharp chisel to get a decent finish. Stoppers are always the last thing I do on the pipes. I don't know why. I think it's the job I least enjoy, probably. It's very, I don't know, it's very repetitive. I suppose it's all repetitive, but this is particularly repetitive, and it has to be right. But again, you know, the finished product is very satisfying. Nothing like a sharp chisel. So this is basically a square version of the round handles. We're just going to put a little top hat on it now, so we can take a taper the top of the handle where I've cut you can just see faintly the lines I'm working to on the top. I've marked those with a marking gauge. This style of stopper will be used right to the top now, right to the tiny, tiny pipes. I'm sorry, I don't know why this is out of focus. I haven't quite mastered this camera yet. Now we just tidy that top up, the top surface with a bit of sandpaper, and just take the sharp edges on the underneath of that top hat, because so that it feels nicer for the tuner. Quite sharp edges otherwise. And we put a little bit of chamfer on, which I haven't showed. Makes it easier to get the stoppers into the pipe. Same process. Cut the leather off. And there we have the first rectangular stopper. I'll just quickly show you one of the very small ones. These are quite good fun actually, because they're really quick and easy to do. All the more satisfying when it's sped up. Now we're on to making the pipe feet. Now I'm not a professional wood turner, I'm self-taught, but when you do as many feet and stopper handles as you have to do to just do one stop of pipes, you get you get good at the way you do it. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but this is the way I do it. So the pipe foot has to be tapered, obviously, because when it goes into the rack board it has to be loose initially, and then a nice snug fit when the pipe is firmly in the tip hole. So I've done two different sizes from one of them, 2mm difference. Roughing the taper off with a roughing gouge, and then finishing off with a skew chisel. If you can master the skew chisel, you can get a beautiful finish. You don't need any sanding. Although I probably will just sand this a little bit just to get a really nice smooth finish. Then we use the storyboard like we did with the stopper handles, the mortise and the taper at the bottom. Using a spanner again to get the exact size so that will fit nicely in the tip hole, and on the other end nicely into the mortise hole at the bottom of the block of the pipe. I just cut the taper with a skew. Now I'll leave these the excess ends on, so that I can put them in the chuck to drill down the centre, as you'll see here. So one end goes into the chuck, and the other end is held by what's called a steady rest. So it's 3 revolving wheels that hold the pipe in place while I cut the hole. The small pipes can be really tricky, where the drill will want to wander and just go out through the side of the pipe. That happens occasionally, but if you can start off central like this, then it should stay in a straight line, and the pine is easier than say an oak foot. But you have to keep clearing the drill, or it will heat up, will wander. And there is the hole down the middle, which is beautifully central. And they're the finished pipes, and I'm afraid I forgot to film the process of fitting the regulating grub screws. It's a simple case of drilling holes and tapping them and putting different size screws in them. Much easier than the traditional way of putting little bits of wood in the end of the feet. This is, yeah, I wouldn't do it any other way. And there are the finished pipes. Now, we're going to do the keyboard next. Luckily, we can do the keyboard next, because I've had a bit of a disaster with the hard drive that I was using. It crashed, and I had to send it off to retrieve the data, which I have done now, so I can carry on with the keyboard. And that will be next, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I look forward to seeing you for the next one. Thank you.